Hey everyone, this is Mike, and a little while ago I went over our Relic questline and gave my thoughts on how it all went down. This time around I'm going to be taking a look at our Relic content and talk about that. When I say Relic content, I mean Bozja/Zadnor as well as Delubrum Reginae, not any of the alternatives that we were able to do for the Relic, because while it was a way for you to complete your Relic, it wasn't content designed for the Relic specifically. I might also touch on some of the Relic steps again because they did influence some of my opinions regarding our content, so let's get started with Bozja. Was not a big fan of Bozja when it first came out, as some might remember, not because of the content itself, but because of how bad it felt to work on your Relic inside of Bozja. The main reason for this is because you basically wanted to be doing two different things. You want to grind skirmishes to level up your resistance rank, but you want to be grinding specific mobs to get the items required for your Relic quests. So this meant that you had to choose, either level up to get access to all the content, or work on your Relic. You couldn't really be doing both at the same time. Now that I've made it to max rank and I don't really care about skirmishes anymore for experience, it doesn't feel that bad, although I do still feel like the drop rate for the different colored memories is kinda low. I think I would have liked it a lot more if they had around the same drop rate as the clusters, although that could just be bad luck with RNG on my side. As for what we're doing in there activity-wise, I must say that I enjoy it more than what we had in Eureka. Eureka was pretty much always the same. Kill mobs, notorious monsters spawn, and then you kill that, rinse and repeat. The only different content that we had was Baldesian Arsenal, and that was only introduced in the final Eureka zone, and it wasn't even needed for you to finish your Relic, so because of that, I just did it once for the mount and called it a day. I know you can do it also to get fragments and such to upgrade your armor, but I didn't really care for those, so once I got my mount, I had obtained everything I wanted from the content. Looking at Bozja and then later also Zadnor, there is more variety in what you're doing. You can run from one skirmish to the next if you're grinding them for metal or for the Bozjan coins. You can go cluster farming if you're after those. Every now and then there's also the critical engagement that would spawn, that while still fairly light on mechanics, they at least have you activate your brain again compared to the mindless skirmish farming, because they actually have mechanics, and some of them can also be very punishing if you fail them. So as someone that isn't a huge fan of the fate grinding, the mix-up of getting to do critical engagements every now and then did make things better. And then of course you also have Castrum or Dalriada if you're inside of Zadnor, which is pretty much a 24-man raid style encounter that is slightly different because there's no roll restrictions, and then there are also other slight differences, like having to split up on the first encounter or having to work together to rescue the hostages and such. I enjoyed that quite a bit. With the changes that were made to Castrum in some of the later patches, it's also a lot better to run now. You get more rewards, you can actively lower the respawn timer on it, so you can run it more often and don't have to wait as long between spawns. Overall, I like it. Outside of that, there is still one more thing that we can do, which is the 1v1s, and I've got a lot of mixed feelings about this, even with the recent change that happened to them. So to start off, they made it seem like it would be really difficult to get into the 1v1s, which in turn would also be really difficult fights, so only the best of the best will be able to do them. In reality, that isn't really the case. The only requirement to getting into a duel isn't that you were playing good, it's just that you were good at not getting hit by mechanics. And for some critical engagements that can definitely be a challenge, but it's not as hard as what they made it out to be, and that's not really what bothers me. What bothers me the most is that it's just so damn hard to get into one. Luckily enough, they did implement a notoriety system, which is something that increases every time you don't get chosen, and then that in turn increases your chances on being chosen on the next one. But before this system was implemented, I think I only managed to get into a 1v1 once, or maybe not even that. Which, the fact that you have to spawn these dual fates in the first place only adds to the frustration, because you could be killing mobs by yourself for half an hour, finally spawn the skirmish that then spawns the critical engagement, do the critical engagement, and then still miss out on the duel. And now you have to either instance hop or wait another hour to try again. Now here's the reason as to why I have mixed feelings about this, because there are a few things that I could think of to make it better, but then it will also immediately take away from what these 1v1s are supposed to be. They are supposed to be exciting events where players come together to watch the chosen one try and beat the challenge, and anything that I could think of to make the experience better for those trying to kill the fights, get the titles, get the achievements, would also directly take away from this experience. A thought that I had, and I think I would still like the most, is that whenever you don't get chosen for a duel, you are given an item or a token instead that you can then turn into an NPC in Gangos that would take you into a solo instance where you can challenge the 1v1 that you missed out on. This allows everyone that was qualified for the duels to challenge these 1v1s, but it also means that the whole spectating aspect of it is gone, with the buffs also being gone from when the duel ends up being successful. I personally would be fine with being given a token and then doing it by myself and only getting the achievement side of things, like just being able to beat the fights and getting the titles, for example, with everything else that comes with it not being given, like the metal or the lock boxes that you normally get from beating them. At least it means that I've been able to practice and beat the fights, because that's what I'm mostly interested in. Keep the good rewards for when you're able to beat it live inside of Bozja and Zadnor instead. But I'll just keep it at that. Could probably go on about it a little bit longer, but I don't really feel like that is necessary. I just have mixed feelings because I would really like to do these fights. It's just really hard to get into the 1v1s most of the time. And then when you do finally get into it, you still have to kind of practice the fights every now and then, unless you do the red mage cheese, of course. But I would like to experience the fights for what they are, and because of how it works, it's just so incredibly hard to get into. But everything that I would change about it would also take away from the overall experience of it being kind of like a group event that people come to watch. So let's skip Delibrum for now and head straight into Zadnor, seeing how it is fairly similar to Bozja. First impressions of Zadnor were way better, and that again is probably because of the quest that came together with it. While you were leveling in Zadnor through skirmishes and critical engagements, you were also actively working towards that one-time step for the Relic. This felt so nice that I ended up finishing my one-time step mostly inside of Zadnor, and I only did the alternative content to pick up a few of the critical engagement items that I was missing out on. Outside of that, I feel like Zadnor is mostly the same as Bozja, you just grind for a different reason. In Bozja you go to grind for coins for your armor and the upgraded armor. In Zadnor you grind for metal to upgrade your resistance honors. And that's also how I look at Castrum and Dalriada. Castrum gives a lot of coins, Dalriada gives a lot of metal. If anything, I prefer Dalriada slightly over Castrum for the fact that the first encounter is handled a lot better. In Castrum it can sometimes be a mess trying to get enough people to both encounters. Too many people down, then too many people run upstairs, it just can take a little while to get everything organized. In Dalriada there's a set number of vehicles that will take you to the second encounter, so once all of the spots have been taken, then that is it, you're good to go. For any other aspects of the content, it's pretty much Bozja 2.0, so I don't really have anything more to add to that, because the improvements that were made inside of Zadnor were also introduced into Bozja. Last but not least, we have Delibrum Regine and its Savage version. I've done both plenty of times, although I should really get a few more Savage clears to finish my augmented gear, as I've been really unlucky with RNG on that one, but I've done it enough times to have a good feeling on the content. Delibrum was a bold move, I would say. It's essentially a 24-man raid, but it doesn't have the role restrictions, and then there's also the Twice Comes Ruin debuff. Conceptually, I think this is really fun. Not being locked into a role because of the job that you choose to play can lead to some fun, exciting runs. Playing tank or healer while being on a DPS job, or going full DPS as a healer, those are fun things to do as they break out of the mold of your normal gameplay loop. But in order to do these things, you need to be prepared for it, and also not everyone thinks about this the same way I do. They queue as a DPS, so they want to play as a DPS and not a tank or a healer. The other thing is having the right essences and actions for this as well, and that is where my problem lies with this content. I don't mind that it was designed with essences and actions in mind, I do mind that you barely get any from running Delibrum itself. Now, the first few runs that you do, you'll probably have some lying around, if you decided not to sell them, of course, because you can totally sell your fragments if you want to make some gil. But once you run out of essences for the job that you play, so let's say you play only tank and you run out of tank essences, then now you need to go back into Bozja to go cluster farming to get more, or spend gil on the market board. Now, the thing is as well, none of this is needed to clear the content either. In Delibrum Savage, you need the stuff to make it through the fights and not hidden rage. But in normal mode, it's just going to make it so that your run takes longer, and because of this a lot of people don't bother getting essences and actions, so your runs can be wildly different because of all of the different factors that affect it. Are people using essences? Are they using actions? Because some actions can not only boost your damage a lot but also your group's damage. Do people have augmented gear? Do they have resistance honors upgraded? And then of course, are they good players? So as you can see, there are a lot of variables that can influence how fast a run is going to be. And for example, when I did it last week, we had runs that took 40-45 minutes, and then the final run we did barely took over 20 minutes. So very big difference in your experience of these runs. Personally, I would have liked it that you can at least buy fragments or maybe even straight up buy actions and essences using the coins that you get from doing Deliberum, because outside of buying gear, the coins are just useless unless they added something which I missed, but I don't think that's the case, because it eliminates the need to run Bozja again. If I'm farming Deliberum, I don't want to have to stop farming Deliberum to keep going back to Bozja just to make sure I have essences and actions ready for the job that I want to play. The twice comes ruin debuff is something that I personally liked a lot. Lately, a lot of fights will just give you a damage down or a vulnerability up whenever you fail a mechanic, and it doesn't really affect you much outside of that. You get a vuln, who cares, maybe the healer needs to heal a little bit more, but maybe that's not even the case either, because one vuln up usually doesn't really do much. Failing mechanics just isn't that punishing in most content. However, because of this debuff, mechanics do become punishing again. Get hit twice and you're dead. Now, of course it's not fun when people are dying left and right because of this, but I do feel like it makes me myself respect mechanics more. Normally I get hit and it's like whatever, I don't really care. Now if I get hit, I want to make sure I don't get hit a second time because I do not want to die. So overall I do like this debuff. As for Deliberum Savage, I was not part of the progression teams for this. I just hopped in with a group after they had already cleared, and then I got a few clears like that. But overall I think DR Savage was good. The 48 player aspect of it is probably what makes the content the hardest because it does require a lot of organization, but luckily enough with a somewhat recent patch you are now able to do it with a minimum of 24 players, so it's a lot easier to get a group together for it. Of course, if you do it with only 24 players, certain aspects become a bit harder and certain parts of the encounter will also become more punishing when people mess up, but I think that is a worthwhile trade-off. DR Savage is where I feel like the whole actions and essences thing comes more to the forefront, because you need certain actions to make it through the fights mechanically, and then for those that don't need to take actions for the sake of mechanics, they can take actions for damage boosting purposes instead, and that speeds up your run quite a bit. The overall difficulty for this felt just right, and again the respecting of mechanics felt even more important here as well, and that is what I prefer from fights as well. Nowadays a lot of fights you just greed as much DPS as you can, because if you fail something because of greed, it usually doesn't really matter. Here it matters a lot that you did not fail mechanics because of the twice comes ruin debuff, and then also the fact that you couldn't get rest normally, so the stakes were a lot higher, which is what I liked about it quite a bit. Reward-wise, I feel like they could have done a better job. You get a mount from clearing it once and then the same minion every single run, but things like the special mount and the hairstyle that drop from normal mode aren't in here, and it also doesn't count as Deliberum clears for your Relic step that has you do Deliberum. So I would have liked it if they would have counted for that, because right now DR Savage is just there to get your mount on your first clear and then augment your gear, and that is pretty much it, which is kind of a bummer to me. It would have been really nice if it gave increased progress for your Relic weapon, because it is a lot more difficult to clear than Deliberum normal, not just because of the difficulty of the raid, but also because of the organization aspect that goes into it. So overall, I'm pretty content with what we got for our Relic this time around. It certainly isn't perfect, but I did enjoy what we got in Shadowbringers more than what we got in Eureka from Stormblood. I'm still planning on finishing at least 2 more Relics, which are actually very close to being done at this point, and then I'll mostly also hop back in during Endwalkers to level my Reaper and Sage. So I'm going to be spending more time in this content for the foreseeable future, and I'm looking forward to do so. Let me know what your thoughts are on the content down below. What did you like about it? What did you dislike about it? I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are on it. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.